How far would you go to achieve perfection? For Stanley Kubrick, the answer was clear. There were no limits. From pushing actors beyond exhaustion to demanding hundreds of takes for a single scene, Kubrick's pursuit of perfection was both legendary and notorious. He's often hailed as one of the greatest filmmakers of all time, despite directing only 13 films. But nearly all of them are praised as masterpieces, each showcasing his unparalleled attention to detail and his ability to master any genre he tackled. His films are filled with complex and controversial characters, but none of those characters are as complex or fascinating as Kubrick himself. In this video, we're going to dive into the grit, the intensity, and the tyrannical control Kubrick wielded to bring his visions to life. We're talking about nearly asphyxiating his cast and crew with a crop sprayer, injuring lead actors, and spending 7 weeks to shoot a single scene. From script development to final editing, Kubrick controlled every aspect of the filmmaking process, often leading to some of the longest continuous shoots in the industry. But in the end, the films got finished, and more often than not, they were worth the effort. Stanley Kubrick was born in New York City in 1928 to a Jewish family, though he wasn't raised religious and instead developed atheistic views as he grew older. Despite having an above-average IQ, Kubrick struggled as a student in high school, making a higher education seem unlikely. Two of his passions growing up were playing chess, which he credited with teaching him patience and discipline, and photography. He was part of his high school's photography club and turned his passion into a career in 1946 by getting hired as a photographer for Look magazine. At Look, Kubrick captured everything from streetscapes to boxing matches to musicians. It was during his time at Look that his fascination with cinema grew. He went to movie theaters more often and began studying film theory. Kubrick started with short films, making 2 before moving on to feature-length projects. His early influences were directors Max Ophüls and Elia Kazan, but later named Ingmar Bergman as his favorite director. His first short, Day of the Fight, released in 1951, was a 12-minute documentary about boxer Walter Cartier. It cost him $3,900 to make and sold for $4,000, and it already featured the backwards tracking shot that would become a trademark of his style. Kubrick soon left Look to pursue filmmaking full-time, famously saying after watching a film, "I don't know a goddamn thing about movies, but I know I can make a better film than that." RKO, which bought his first short, financed his next documentary short, Flying Padre, about a priest who uses a small airplane to travel between isolated settlements. With 2 short films under his belt, Kubrick was ready to tackle his first feature-length film, Fear and Desire, released in 1953. He scraped together $10,000 from family and friends to create what was initially intended to be a silent film about a group of soldiers stranded behind enemy lines. The entire production team consisted of just 14 people, with only 5 actors who had to play multiple roles. Kubrick served as the director, cinematographer, and editor. To stay within budget, he used a baby stroller as a makeshift dolly and a crop sprayer to create a fog effect, nearly asphyxiating the cast and crew in the process. But Kubrick decided afterwards on adding sound to the film, which drove the budget up to $53,000, requiring a bailout from a producer in exchange for help on a TV series. However, Kubrick himself disowned the film, even wanting to destroy the negative. He ensured it was never widely re-released, although a print made by Kodak eventually surfaced. To fund his next project, Kubrick directed his 3rd short film in 1953, The Seafarers, a 30-minute color film for the Seafarers International Union, which featured the sideways tracking dolly shot that would become another signature technique. Kubrick then moved on to his 2nd feature film, Killer's Kiss, released in 1955, a crime drama about a boxer and his relationship with his neighbor. Kubrick once again handled directing, cinematography, and editing. On welfare during production, he scraped by, pouring any money he could find into the film. Shot in black and white, Killer's Kiss featured Kubrick's exploring experimental shots, but he encountered some technical issues. Shadows cast by the boom mic and pole were visible in many of the shots, with no easy workaround. So Kubrick fired the sound crew and opted to post-dub the entire film. After 3 months of filming, much of it done in secret without permits in New York City using handheld cameras, Kubrick spent another 7 months completing the sound, pushing the budget to $75,000. Fortunately, United Artists paid $100,000 for the film and funded his next project. Though better received than Fear and Desire, with critics recognizing Kubrick's growing talent, Kubrick himself still saw it as student-level filmmaking and resented the studio's insistence on a happy ending. As his success began to ramp up, so did his struggles with studio interference, setting the stage for future conflicts over creative control. Kubrick continued through the 50s, still barely scraping by, but things were about to change. In 1955, he met producer James B. Harris, who quickly recognized Kubrick's talent. They formed Harris Kubrick Picture Corporation and went on to make 3 films together. The first was The Killing in 1956, a heist film about a racetrack robbery gone wrong, notable for its non-linear structure that later influenced movies like Reservoir Dogs and Pulp Fiction. Based on the book Clean Break, it marked Kubrick's first experience working with a professional crew and had a budget of $320,000. Filming in Los Angeles, Kubrick faced Hollywood union rules that prevented him from being both the director and the cinematographer, so he hired Lucien Ballard to film it. But even at just 27, Kubrick was already a bit of a control freak, often threatening to fire Ballard if he moved the camera where Kubrick didn't want it. Despite waiving his director's fee and living off loans from Harris, Kubrick remained deeply involved in directing, cinematography by proxy, and editing. It was kind of funny, but early test screenings were poor, so the studio demanded a more linear edit of the film, but this version was even more confusing. So the original edit was eventually released with added narration, but the film still flopped at the box office, losing $130,000. However, critics praised Kubrick's raw yet meticulous style, and his reputation in Hollywood soared, catching the attention of actors and producers alike. Kubrick and Harris collaborated again on 1957's Paths of Glory, an anti-war film that's now considered one of Kubrick's best, and where his infamous habit of demanding endless takes started. The film, set during World War I, stars Kirk Douglas as a commanding officer who defends 3 soldiers scapegoated for cowardice after a failed mission. Douglas immediately fell in love with the script, telling Kubrick, "Stanley, I don't think this picture will ever make a nickel, but we have to make it." Easy for Douglas to say because he still earned a hefty salary, about 1/3 of the film's budget, while Kubrick once again worked for only a share of the profits. Despite their shared vision, the two clashed frequently, with Douglas often using his clout to override Kubrick's script changes. Kubrick's level of control on set was very uncommon back then, especially for a 28-year-old director. Actor Adolphe Menjou performed one scene 17 times, going on a huge rant bad-mouthing Kubrick. Kubrick quietly let him rant before saying, "Alright, let's try the scene once more." Other examples of his many takes was a meal scene requiring 68 takes, each needing a fresh roast duck, and in a courtroom scene that needed 74 takes that had Kubrick pushing the cast and crew past overtime regulations in Germany. In interviews, Kubrick mentioned that the reason for needing many takes is because most actors don't learn their lines well. So in performing, they have to think about their lines, which stops them from being able to work on their emotion. He famously replied to the controversial takes with, "I don't do a lot of takes when it's good." The film's large-scale battlefield scenes were planned down to the last detail, including positioning extras to ensure they died in the correct area during explosions. And actor Timothy Carey caused so many disruptions, including faking his own kidnapping for publicity, that Kubrick and Harris fired him. Paths of Glory opened to okay numbers but was a critical triumph, praised for its powerful message, standout performances, and Kubrick's direction. It's a must-watch film that really sticks with you for a while. I don't know how he managed to make it while only 28. These two successes caught the attention of Marlon Brando, who invited Kubrick to direct what would later become One-Eyed Jacks. They worked together on the script, but Kubrick was fired just 2 weeks before production began due to creative differences. Shortly after, Kirk Douglas brought Kubrick on board to direct 1960's Spartacus after firing the original director, Anthony Mann, a historical epic about a slave uprising led by Spartacus, played by Douglas. The film was Kubrick's most ambitious project yet, involving thousands of cast and crew members and a budget that ballooned to $12 million, including a $150,000 director's fee for Kubrick. This was also the project that Kubrick had the least control over, leaving such a sour taste in his mouth that he changed where he made films for the rest of his career. He clashed constantly with cinematographer Russell Meddy, who eventually walked off set, frustrated by Kubrick's micromanagement. Kubrick took over much of the cinematography himself, famously telling Meddy, "You can do your job by sitting in your chair and shutting up. I'll be the director of photography." Ironically, Meddy won an Oscar for the film's cinematography even though Kubrick shot most of it. Kubrick also had ongoing conflicts with screenwriter Dalton Trumbo, who was blacklisted in Hollywood for being openly communist, until Douglas used his influence to lift the ban. Kubrick and Trumbo argued frequently, especially over the character of Spartacus, whom Kubrick felt was written too generically. And then there's the "I am Spartacus" scene, which Douglas asked Kubrick for his opinion about, to which Kubrick in front of the cast and crew called it a stupid idea. Douglas was furious. Kubrick and Douglas's disagreements were so severe that they even went into therapy together, and Douglas later expressed regret over hiring Kubrick, vowing never to work with him again. Despite these challenges, Spartacus was a critical and commercial success, winning 4 Oscars, and Kubrick earned praise managing such a massive production while maintaining a signature visual style. But Kubrick disowned the film, refusing to consider it part of his core filmography due to the studio's interference. Frustrated with Hollywood methods and concerned about rising crime in the US, Kubrick moved to England in 1961, setting the stage for the next chapter of his career. Kubrick's next film, 1962's Lolita, marked his final collaboration with Harris and was filmed in England, where they had complete control over the production. Filming in England also allowed them to write off many costs if they employed a mostly British crew, and Kubrick had a deathly fear of flying, so filming near his home in England was a huge plus. Lolita, based on the controversial novel of the same name, follows a British novelist in America who becomes sexually obsessed with a teenager named Lolita. Kubrick toned down the provocative content by raising Lolita's age from 12 to 14, and replaced a lot of the book's explicit moments with subtler visual cues. Kubrick's patient way of directing often had him only getting a minute of usable footage per day, dragging the filming to 88 days and a $2 million budget. Despite having total control, Kubrick still faced issues with the cast and crew. He clashed with cinematographer Oswald Morris and almost fired him after the film's images leaked in a newspaper. But it was later revealed that the film processing lab's junior assistant had sold the images. Despite these hiccups, Lolita was a critical success, with reviewers noting Kubrick's confidence behind the camera right from the opening scene. Directors like David Lynch, Sofia Coppola, and Paul Thomas Anderson have since said it's one of their favorites. Surprisingly, the film also performed well commercially, grossing $9.2 million. After this film, Kubrick began one of the best runs in filmmaking history, starting with Dr. Strangelove in 1964. Dr. Strangelove, or How I Learned to Stop Worrying and Love the Bomb, is a political satire that unfolds in a war room where top officials scramble to prevent a nuclear strike ordered by a rogue general. To prepare, Kubrick read nearly 50 books on nuclear war and collaborated with authors of the film's source material. Initially envisioned as a serious thriller, Kubrick discovered a satirical side to the story in early drafts and decided to lean into the dark comedy, a shift that caused producer Harris to split up with Kubrick. With a budget of nearly $2 million, the film featured Peter Sellers, who had also starred in Lolita, in 3 major roles including the titular character. And this production stood out from others due to its surprisingly lighthearted atmosphere. Kubrick and Sellers got along so well that Kubrick often struggled not to break into laughter during Sellers' scenes, very different from his usual serious way of directing. With everyone having fun, the crew was more aligned with Kubrick's vision than ever before. But that's not to say Kubrick wasn't super controlling. He still demanded certain specific things like the war room table being green so it resembled the officials playing poker with the world's fate despite the film being black and white. And he still needed many takes, including Sellers' scene, who didn't get the point of redoing them. After 15 weeks of filming and another 8 months of editing, Dr. Strangelove released to critical acclaim and is now considered one of the best political satires of the century. Kubrick earned his first Oscar nomination for Best Picture, Best Director, and Best Adapted Screenplay, while Sellers was nominated for Best Actor. Despite some concerns from the studio that the film might be seen as anti-American or anti-military, it was a box office success. Kubrick closed out his decade in 1968 with 2001: A Space Odyssey, a sci-fi epic that redefined the genre and remains groundbreaking to this day. The film follows humanity's quest to understand the origins of a mysterious monolith aided by the supercomputer HAL 9000. To achieve a realistic portrayal of space exploration, Kubrick consulted with NASA and other leading scientists, meticulously overseeing every detail from the spacecraft designs to the actors' costumes. With no CGI, all effects were achieved practically or chemically. Dozens of models ranging from 2 to 55 feet were built for the film, and starry backgrounds were painted using mats. A task so difficult that Kubrick calculated it would take one person 13 years to complete, so he hired 12 more artists to finish it in 1 year. The film's most ambitious set was a 38-foot centrifuge with a 27-ton rotating wheel to simulate artificial gravity, costing $750,000. One of the most memorable shots, the floating pen, required months of experimentation before Kubrick settled on sticking the pen to a sheet of glass in front of the camera. True to form, Kubrick demanded multiple takes for each scene, though the most time-consuming aspect of the film were the 205 special effects shots. The film's production stretched 16 months behind schedule, ballooning the budget from $6 million to $10.5 million. But despite the challenges, 2001: A Space Odyssey was a huge box office hit. Critics initially felt mixed about it, with many baffled by the film's narrative, especially the absence of dialogue in the first 25 and last 23 minutes. Over time, however, it became regarded as a cinematic masterpiece, renowned for its groundbreaking special effects and philosophical depth. In fact, the film's realism was so convincing that it fueled conspiracy theories claiming Kubrick directed a hoax moon landing. Kubrick earned several Oscar nominations, winning his only ever Oscar for Best Effects, a crazy yet bittersweet achievement for a director of his caliber. We now enter the more controversial half of Kubrick's career, where the on-set stories become even wilder and the genres he tackled varied even more. His next film was 1971's A Clockwork Orange, the first Kubrick film I ever watched. The film follows a violent young gang leader in near-future Britain who undergoes government-enforced psychological conditioning to alter his criminal behavior. It's based on a book of the same name and became Kubrick's most controversial film ever. Filming took 6 months and cost $1.4 million, much smaller and quicker than 2001, but that doesn't mean it was easy. Before filming, Kubrick needed thousands of potential location photos to find real locations that would fit this near-future setting. And his demand for retakes was as relentless as ever, with the film's final scene requiring 74 takes. Lead actor Malcolm McDowell developed a close working relationship with Kubrick even though his time on set was rough. During the Ludovico technique scene, the clamps holding McDowell's eyes open scratched his corneas, temporarily blinding him. He also cracked ribs during another scene, and Kubrick gave McDowell's character a pet snake after learning the actor had a fear of reptiles. And nothing got past Kubrick in this production, with McDowell later saying, "No matter what it is, even if it's a question of buying a shampoo, it goes through him. He likes total control." A Clockwork Orange was a box office success but received mixed reviews. Many praised Kubrick's direction and use of wide-angle lenses, but others called the film repulsive, dangerous, and an ideological mess. During the New Hollywood era, where controversial subject matter was more common, A Clockwork Orange still stood out for its graphic violence and sexual assault scenes. The film initially received an X rating in the US and UK, forcing Kubrick to replace some of the scenes. But in the UK, there were 2 copycat crimes linked to the film, including an assault that mimicked one of the film's rape scenes. Kubrick and his family received death threats, prompting him to withdraw the film from UK distribution, where it wouldn't be available there until after his death. Despite the uproar, Kubrick still earned 3 Oscar nominations for the film, and it has since been reevaluated as a classic. Kubrick's next project was one of his most technically complex, 1975's Barry Lyndon. This period epic follows a cunning Irishman's rise through the social classes of 18th century England. Kubrick and his team conducted extensive research on the era, initially planning to film in Ireland. However, this was a difficult time in Ireland with the IRA active, and when they learned Kubrick was filming a movie with English soldiers, he was added to their hit list. The production received bomb threats, and Kubrick was warned he had 24 hours to leave the country, so he left in 12. Filming moved to England, but it was far from smooth sailing. Kubrick's demand for retakes persisted, with some scenes like Barry Lyndon's first meeting with Lady Honoria Lyndon taking over 100 takes. To maintain period accuracy, Kubrick also had actress Marissa Berenson avoid the sun for months to preserve a pale complexion. And many scenes were filmed using only natural light, with the candlelit interior scenes requiring a special lens designed by NASA, which had the largest aperture ever built for film use. Kubrick also envisioned the film to look like 18th century paintings, and many shots were composed to have this aesthetic. And after 9 months of filming and a budget that ballooned to $11 million after 2 major shutdowns, Barry Lyndon emerged as one of the most visually stunning films ever made. It received 4 Oscars and critical acclaim, but it was a commercial flop in the US, where audiences found it too slow and long. Barry Lyndon flopping made Kubrick seek a more commercially viable project while allowing him to explore a genre he'd always wanted to tackle: horror. In 1980, Kubrick released The Shining based on Stephen King's novel, and it became Kubrick's most obsessive film production yet. The film followed an isolated family taking care of a closed hotel during the winter, starring Jack Nicholson and Shelley Duvall. As always, Kubrick controlled every detail, demanding as many takes as needed to get the perfect shot. The infamous blood elevator scene took only 3 takes, but each took 9 days to set up. A shot of a tennis ball rolling toward Danny required 50 takes. The most notorious example, however, is the scene where Duvall's character backs up the stairs with a baseball bat, moving away from Nicholson, allegedly taking 127 takes. Though some reports suggest the number includes rehearsals, similar to the bar scene that needed 148 takes. To capture genuine terror from Duvall, Kubrick really put her through a lot, criticizing her acting, telling her she's wasting everyone's time. Duvall's performance was initially panned, even receiving a Razzie nomination for Worst Actress. Though that nomination has since been rescinded because of the abuse, and her genuine fear of Kubrick became more widely known. Nicholson also had a tough time, though for different reasons. The script changed daily, so he stopped reading it and learned his lines minutes before filming. And if you remember why Kubrick always did so many takes, then it's no surprise why this production had to suffer from them. Kubrick and his demands extended the shoot to over a year, with the budget rising to $19 million. The Shining did well at the box office, but reviews were mixed, with critics praising Kubrick's eerie use of the Steadicam but criticizing the film's slow pace. Stephen King was also disappointed with how much the film deviated from the book. Over time, however, The Shining has been re-evaluated and is now considered one of the greatest horror films of all time. It's wild to think that Kubrick was nominated for Worst Director at the time of its release, proof that even some of the best films can be misunderstood at first. Now we enter the final stretch of Kubrick's career, his last 2 films. In 1987, Kubrick released Full Metal Jacket, a Vietnam War film following a US Army recruit through boot camp and into combat. Because of his fear of flying, Kubrick filmed within a 30-mile radius of his home in England. To recreate Vietnam, they imported 200 palm trees from North Africa and thousands of plastic plants from Hong Kong. They also filmed in Baekden gasworks for the ruined Vietnamese city scenes, even though the location was contaminated with asbestos and other chemicals. For casting, Kubrick opened audition to any young actor in the US, watching 800 of them himself. Vincent D'Onofrio gained 70 pounds for his role in the film's first chapter, breaking De Niro's Raging Bull record, but he tore some ligaments in the obstacle course from the added weight. As always, Kubrick's obsession with multiple takes was evident, with scenes like the bathroom mop scene requiring 62 takes. But he finally found an actor who needed the least amount of takes: Lee Ermey. A real-life former Marine drill instructor, Ermey impressed Kubrick so much that he allowed him to improvise, molding parts of the script around his dialogue. Most of the Ermey scenes required only 2 to 3 takes, which was unheard of for Kubrick, with just one scene reaching 37 takes. And Kubrick made sure Ermey didn't interact with the actors playing recruits to maintain authenticity in their reactions. When lead actor Matthew Modine's pregnant wife was due to give birth, Kubrick initially refused to let Modine leave set, arguing that he'd just be in the way at the hospital. Modine had to threaten to cut his own hand to get Kubrick's permission. The production actually stretched on for so long that Modine got married, had a child, and celebrated his child's first birthday all during filming. With a final $16 million budget, Full Metal Jacket was a commercial success. Critics praised the film's visual style, calling it one of the best-looking war films ever made, though some felt it fell short compared to Apocalypse Now and The Deer Hunter. It was only nominated for Best Adapted Screenplay, but like many Kubrick films, its reputation only got better with time. During the 80s and 90s, Kubrick also worked on a script for what would eventually become Steven Spielberg's AI Artificial Intelligence. He wanted to produce it and approached Spielberg in 1995 to direct it. Kubrick then worked on his final film, Eyes Wide Shut, released in 1999, which starred the then married couple Tom Cruise and Nicole Kidman. This erotic mystery follows a couple grappling with infidelity, leading the husband to stumble upon a secretive sex cult. Filming took place in England, and Vincent D'Onofrio had warned Cruise and Kidman to rent a house because they'd be there for a while, and he was right. The production set a Guinness World Record for the longest continuous shoot, lasting over 15 months. The shoot was so long that the couple's children apparently developed English accents. Kubrick was at his most controlling and meticulous. A 13-minute billiard scene reportedly took 200 takes and up to 7 weeks to film, and a scene of Cruise just walking through a door took 95 takes. The script was often rewritten on set, and the crew grew very exhausted from Kubrick's attention to detail. Since the film was set in New York City, Kubrick insisted on accurately recreating the city street at Pinewood Studios, going so far as to have someone measure the widths of the streets and location of newspaper vendors. Kubrick cast Cruise and Kidman specifically to exploit their real-life marriage for the film's benefit. He participated in psychoanalysis sessions with the couple, probing their fears about their relationship and introducing elements of distrust. He directed them separately and in secret, and in one instance filmed Kidman's sex scene for 6 days, banning Cruise from the set and not allowing him to know what happened, adding to the film's tension. The extended shoot ballooned the budget to $65 million, and Kubrick had to make some last-minute edits to navigate censorship rules to get that wide release. But on March 7, 1999, less than a week after showing the final cut to Warner Brothers, Kubrick died unexpectedly of a heart attack in his sleep at age 70. His funeral was very private, attended only by family and friends, including Cruise, Kidman, and Spielberg, who went on to make and release AI Artificial Intelligence in 2001 with a new script. There's a lot of speculation as to whether Eyes Wide Shut was released exactly as Kubrick intended, with many believing only final sound mixing, scoring, and color correction were completed without him. The film did well at the box office but received mixed reviews, with many critics calling it long and dull. However, Eyes Wide Shut has been getting more love over the years, especially towards Kubrick's unique way of keeping this dreamlike, unsettling atmosphere throughout the film. With just 13 films spanning a wide range of genres, Stanley Kubrick became one of the most influential filmmakers of all time. Few directors have pushed the boundaries of cinema as he did, and none have matched his obsessive attention to detail and relentless pursuit of perfection. His approach was often excessive and at times downright cruel, but his refusal to compromise on his artistic vision made each film a unique experience, whether exploring the vastness of space or the depths of human psychology. Kubrick was one of the most controlling and demanding directors, but also one of the most fascinating men behind the camera. So there you have it, Stanley Kubrick's iconic career and all the moments he was most controlling. Do you think he's one of the greatest American directors? Share your thoughts below. If you enjoyed this video, drop a like and subscribe. And check out our Patreon for some cool perks, but until next time, have a good one.